SosKaid staggered slightly as she awkwardly aimed her last step down into Keshar's muddy tank floor. She giggled as she straightened and raised her arms in the air. Ta-da! She said quietly to herself with a smile, and then remembered that Hawthorn was gone and frowned. It was late. The rain was really pounding down now, and she still didn't have a good lead. What was she doing here again? She thought to herself, holding up a hand as if to shade her eyes from a sun that wasn't there. She inflated her cheeks and let out a puff of slightly toxic air. She hadn't had that much to drink, had she? Then again, she'd never had anything much to drink before, and certainly nothing so strong as Mikey's moonshine. There was a light coming from the other side of the town's wall. A door was open. Was that the trading post? Well, might as well go and ask around there before calling it a day. She became suddenly aware of a heavy dripping sound nearby, and her heart seemed to clench as she had a sudden flash of Daisy hung there skewered to the wall with her arm raised toward her, pleading in her eyes. SosKaid shook the image hard from her head, staggered sideways, and threw up. She felt a little better. I should just go to bed, she thought to herself, and turned squelchily on her heel to make her way back up the ladder. Putting a hand on the first rung, she thought she heard shouts hammering over the sound of the rain. She looked. A figure was silhouetted in the light of the trading house doorway, and there was more shouting. She should check it out, she decided, and turned again to make her way to the steps leading up to the lit doorway. Maybe they could help with her investigation. Everyone here's so nice, she thought, happy again. She was concentrating so hard on getting each foot onto the next step in front of her, she completely failed to see the raised shotgun in the figure's hand before her. So nice, she thought again, giggled quietly, and continued to climb up the stairs. Hello and welcome back to A Wasteland Story. Our heroine has finally made it to the ghoul city of Keshar, where she has been tasked with solving a murder mystery for the promise of help and favour from the town's mayor, Jesse Pettigrew, to assist with the infiltration of the nearby, now probably super mutant-infested Newark, and obtain a sample of the FEV which is causing all this big green nonsenseness. SosKaid and Brotherhood of Steel scribe Hawthorn went to the local couple Joseph and Teresa's farm, where they found Teresa, affectionately known as Daisy for plot reasons, doing her best impression of a rotting shish kebab. Sorry, that was tasteless. Much I imagine like the shit. Okay, sorry. Thinking she was dead upon seeing her pinned to the wall and dripping blood, she just raised a spooky finger to point over SosKaid's shoulder just as there came the unmistakable sound of a shotgun and a strange scream. In trouble again and constantly drawn into drama, what on earth will SosKaid and Hawthorn do now? Well, this. You recognise the impaled woman as Teresa, as described by the mayor. And her eyes are frozen wide with fear, and her chin is slumped down towards her chest. She's not breathing. Let's see. She's not breathing. Is she alive? I think it's very unlikely that she's alive. Is she alive? Ho! She is alive. Now, this is already interesting because in the book, she's dead. If you remember the last episode, we started playing around with our first published adventure, called With a Bang and a Whimper, from the Fallout 2D20 core rulebook. So far so good, but already things aren't following the path of how they were written, which is kind of the point. Mythic says she's alive. SosKaid snapped out of her shock and spun deftly, slamming her back a little too hard to the wall and raised her pistol at the doorway, her breath coming heavily. 1, 2 long seconds passed as she realised her breath was shaking. Nothing came through the door. 3, 4. Daisy gurgled again, and her arm dropped with a thud against the wall from which she hung. Her eyes rolled up into her head. Fuck, cursed SosKaid as she made a snap decision and turned her back on the open doorway. So let's see if we can do something to stabilise. I think it's going to be a difficulty 3 to see if we can stabilise her
And that's going to be medicine. So difficulty 3. I'm going to need another dice and really just hope for the best. And I think Thingy can assist.
Quick, said SosKaid. Help me get her down. She motioned to Hawthorn to get to Daisy's other side as they tried to get up under her shoulders to take the weight off the farm tool. Hold her, but don't take your eye off that door. Hawthorn looked panicked, eyes flicking from the floating corpse to the doorway behind SosKaid. She regretted not bringing Dogmeat with them. She would have felt a lot safer knowing he was on guard, but his habit of constantly trying to steal and bury important parts of the residence was becoming a bit of a problem, so they had decided he could sit this one out. She took a deep breath. Hawthorn, said SosKaid, her voice calmer this time. Take a breath. You can do this. Now lift. The two heaved the dead weight as SosKaid pulled on the farm tool. It came free and clattered to the ground. Daisy's eyes shot open again and she gasped, a horrible rattling, sucking of breath before all three of them fell heavily onto the floor. SosKaid got to her knees as blood started pumping freely and dramatically from the ghoul's stomach. She started ripping off shreds from Daisy's dress, trying to get a piece long enough to use as a tourniquet. Hawthorn, watch that door, she said as she finally got off a long strip and stretched it out in front of her. Daisy's eyes were still open, but had stopped looking wildly around. SosKaid knew she didn't have long.
Okay. Bad roll. We got 1 success and a complication. So she was breathing, and I think in trying to heal her, we didn't do a good job, and she dies.
SosKaid knelt, frozen, bandage in hand, realizing she had no idea what to actually do next that might give the ghoul a fighting chance. She felt her heart beating in her ears again as she watched the light go from Daisy's eyes, the blood no longer pumping from the wound in her stomach. Oh my god. Fuck it, she hissed, wiping away a tear of frustration before nearly gagging as she realized she was tasting the woman's blood from her hand. There was no time for this. She had to focus. Don't let emotion get in the way and decide rationally on her next move based on the current circumstances only. SosKaid? Said Hawthorn from the doorway. What's happening? What do we do? SosKaid stood, stuffing an unused bandage in her coat pocket and drawing her pistol. Move out, she said in a stern voice. Go from room to room, clear them. I'll take the left corners, you take the right. Hawthorn nodded, suddenly seeming to regain some control from the instruction. Yes, sir, she said, seemingly involuntarily, and then took a step forward, laser pistol held at medium height. They looked at each other and nodded before heading to the first door on the left.
So let's investigate one of the rooms. See if we can figure out what happened. Although I just read what happened. But they need to still figure out so they can report back to things. So we're going to have to do a perception survival. We're going to explore the living room. I'm going to make it a difficulty 1 test for each of these. See if we can figure it out.
At this point in my first attempt at playing a published adventure, I was met with the first main challenge: how to separate player and character knowledge, and I had a couple of options. I could read everything thoroughly and then roll to see what my characters did, both by using Mythic for the if-then prompts like, if the characters inspect the teddy bear, then roll for evasion to dodge the fluffy explosion, and mechanical rolls like roll perception survival to see if my character notices the super mutant hiding under the coffee table.
So we don't figure out what happened in the living room other than it's wrecked. It does look like there was a struggle. In the kitchen, we also don't find anything.
Alternatively, I could try and not read anything, make blurry cross-eyed glances at the page, and then try a few rolls to give myself permission to go through the relevant bits and pieces. In this case, I sort of bumbled through and did a little bit of both.
In the bedroom, it's small and plain, with the door still open. It's neatly made bed and a pile of glass shards, crumpled, torn up photos.
Reading a bit, not too much, and then seeing what my characters noticed by making a roll for each room. It didn't really work, at least in this part. I was making perception rolls for SosKaid to see which of the dot point clues she would notice and what I was allowed to read, but I did find it a little bit silly.
This is weird. I'm not sure how to handle this. I mean, I like reading what's going on. It helps me visualize the scene.
But I wasn't really playing. Besides, SosKaid had heard a shotgun blast nearby while staring into the nearly dead again eyes of someone who she could have saved, and so either solo roleplayer was missing the tension and investigative nature that would have been portrayed to a group at the table. For SosKaid, however, it was tense as hell. SosKaid and Hawthorn nodded to each other from either side of the closed door frame before SosKaid pushed the door gently with her foot. It creaked open slowly, but there was no other sound. "Now," SosKaid whispered, and they both stepped inside. She was aware of Hawthorn to her right, and she stopped herself from trying to take in the whole room, trusting her companion to cover her side. They swept their respective corners with their sights for a tense moment. Nothing moved. Then, taking in her surroundings, she saw that it was the couple's bedroom, and it was a wreck. Smashed picture frames, broken glass, and strewn clothes blanketed the small space. "Clear," said SosKaid. The door clicked behind her, and she spun around, heart mid-leap in her throat. Hawthorn was standing next to it, looking sheepish. "Sorry, I bumped it when we were coming in." "It's okay," said SosKaid, trying to get her breathing under control. She noticed what looked like thin claw marks on the back of the door, and the lock that looked like it had been wrenched from its housing with inhuman strength. "Keep moving," she said.
We do hear a shotgun blast, so I think we go out to investigate.
Suddenly, there came another unmistakable shotgun blast and a guttural scream. "Did that come from outside?" said Hawthorn, voice shaking. "Yes," replied SosKaid. "This way." Feeling a little more confident that they weren't going to be attacked from every corner in the darkened house, they moved quickly to the back door. It was also kicked off its hinges, and in the dusty light, they could see bloody footprints heading out via an empty weapons rack. Another shot rang out. "The barn," said SosKaid. "Be ready and stick to your sidearm."
The barn. So it's surrounded by carefully tended tarberry fields. The wide wooden door to the barn is closed but unlatched, and the barn appears to have no windows.
The large wooden doors to the barn were ajar, and SosKaid and Hawthorn took up their positions on either side of them. SosKaid noticed her breathing had once again become calm, whereas Hawthorn was still breathing heavily. "Okay, you stay out here and cover the entrance. If I shout, come in loud. It might be enough to distract them if I really need it," whispered SosKaid, holding Hawthorn's gaze. Hawthorn nodded, looking relieved as her hands took turns holding her pistol while she wiped the sweat off each. She nodded again and took a step backward as SosKaid very slowly and carefully inched the door open with her foot, pistol raised at mid-height as she did. So I think she's going to sneak into the barn. Does she? Difficulty 2 because he's standing there with a gun. So sneak is going to be a 12. She does manage to sneak into the barn. SosKaid's shoulders tensed as she felt rather than heard the creak of the barn door. She nearly flinched and pulled the trigger then and there. Maddening fear made a sudden but thankfully inadequate attempt to take control, and she held it at bay. There was a figure in the middle of the room, haloed by a slight swirling of dust from the sun's last rays coming through a jagged hole in the far wall. The figure had its back to her. It twitched. And then there was the stuttered blast of 2 almost simultaneously fired shells, and a chunk of ceiling disappeared. Splinters of wood and dust fell down around a bulky but vaguely humanoid shape. It turned slowly as it stepped fully into the ray of light. Wild eyes set into a drooling, ghoulish male face. She recognized it from the photos in the kitchen. It was Daisy's husband. He howled and raised the shotgun. And there's another gunshot in there. An explosion resounds from inside. The smell of gun smoke drifts from the opening as the old ghoul steps into the moonlight. So he's not going to attack us. It says here he makes an attack with his double-barrel shotgun against the PC most visible. SosKaid has gone in alone, and she sees him standing there with the gun. Joseph's eyes are wide and mad, his teeth wide with a grimace, and drool spills down from the corner of his lips. He's wearing several layers of shirts, sweaters, and jackets over the top of one another. Interesting. The bulk of his clothing causes his jerking movements to be slow and awkward. "Joseph?" said SosKaid carefully. He seemed to be wearing an entire wardrobe of clothes and was wielding the shotgun crazily in one hand. A heavy, stinking breath assaulted SosKaid's senses. "Joseph?" she said again, taking a step back. "I'm a friend of Daisy's." At this, Joseph's eyes seemed to clear for a second, and he let out a quiet, slobbery sob. She looked deep into his grey eyes and saw pain.
Joseph's neck twitches twice to the right and his voice cracks as he calls out,
I don't know. His breath became ragged again and he collapsed to the ground in a morning prayer position. He was sobbing and seemed to be fiddling with something underneath him. SosKaid felt the urge to call for Hawthorn, but she didn't want to startle the ghoul just yet. It's okay, Joseph, she said as she took small, quiet steps up to him, eyeing the barrel of the shotgun that was only just visible in the quickly darkening room. If she could get the gun away from him, she could call for Hawthorn, and the two of them could perhaps subdue him somehow without hurting him. It's okay, she said again, taking another tentative step. It'll all be okay.
I'm going to see if we can sneak up on him and incapacitate him. So we snuck into the barn. I'm going to do another sneak test, difficulty 3 this time. I'm going to use an action point. And SosKaid has told Hawthorn to stay outside and be ready to run in if she hears gunfire. We're looking for 12. And we get it.
As SosKaid got just close enough to reach the strangely behaving ghoul, she heard a click and saw 2 discarded shell casings. Shit, he'd been reloading, and now he had his hand firmly on the gun again. She was just about to get close enough to grab him from behind, and he didn't currently appear to be paying her any attention. She took a deep breath and inched in, lining up his underarms for a chokehold. Easy, she whispered, this time to herself. She would get a hold of him so that he couldn't get both hands on the gun and then call for Hawthorn. Here goes nothing.
Now, she's not very strong, but I think she gets up behind him and gets him in one of those wrestling headlock things. Does he fire the gun when SosKaid grabs him? Yes, he does.
The world seemed to shake as the shotgun went off in the ghoul's one-handed grip. Dust and splinters fell from the ceiling as SosKaid fought to hold the madman's arms back behind their point of strength, twisting sideways and trying to keep him on his knees, back arched. Joseph howled again, but she had him. At that thought, she heard a second bang as the barn door slammed open and she suddenly realized her mistake. Her small frame must have been almost completely obscured by Joseph's body from Hawthorn's perspective. Hawthorn! Wait!
Hawthorn comes running in. Does Hawthorn freak out and take a shot? She's trained, so I think it's unlikely. But it is dark in there. Does she take a shot? Oh,
don't shoot! SosKaid shouted, but her voice was muffled under the bulk of the man's clothing. It was too late anyway. She felt the man's body writhe as the crimson laser shot sunk into his stomach. She could smell the burning of cloth mixed with that of skin as the ghoul screamed again and spasmed, throwing SosKaid roughly to the side. He stood, clapping his gun into both hands, a crooked line of slightly green drool starting to drip from his mouth. He raised the shotgun with a focus and dexterity nothing like that of a feral. Something was really wrong.
And SosKaid says, no, wait, I've got him. But it's too late. She's taken a shot. She's doing, I think it was 4. She's going to see if she hits. She definitely hits because it was an extreme yes. So she takes a shot and she hits. And she's doing 4 damage to him, leaving him with 10. I think as she takes the shot, he gets hit, knocked back. SosKaid drops him, and he turns around to take a shot back.
The side of Joseph's neck seemed to ripple as part of it burst into an ugly growth. The ghoul didn't even flinch. SosKaid looked into his eyes and could have sworn she saw them swim red. She scrambled to try and regain control of her footing, fumbling for her own weapon at the same time.
So we're going to say, does he shoot at Hawthorn? I think it's likely. He doesn't shoot at Hawthorn, so instead he turns around and he takes a shot with the double-barrel shotgun at SosKaid.
The ghoul lumbered forward, swinging his arms like a hammer throw before release, just connecting with SosKaid's side as he did. For a split second, she felt her center of gravity shift as she began to lift off the ground.
Did she get knocked down? He's got a strength of 7, but she's agile. So for me, a success. For him, not a success. So he doesn't manage to knock her down. She sort of rolls out of the way and jumps back up on her feet, and then he gets a shot in her at SosKaid as she is running away to get in a better position.
SosKaid reacted. Instead of fighting her unwanted momentum, she embraced it, using her last point of contact with the ground to push herself that little bit more into the air, twisting as she did. She hit the barn floor just on the sweet spot of her shoulder, just like she'd practiced all those times leaping and rolling from the shed roof in her village. She rolled, sideways, over her back and flicked up, relatively gracefully onto her already running feet, now pointing in the opposite direction. There, an old rusted tractor. She forced everything she had into even more speed as she closed the gap, breathing hard but evenly, waiting for the shot. It came.
So he's 10 to hit her in the back. Difficulty 2. He does not succeed. So she manages to, thanks to her, this 2 defense for agility is amazing. So as she starts to run away, she feels the spray of the shotgun shell sort of fire over her shoulder and hit a piece of farm equipment that's sort of hanging from the ceiling. And she manages to sort of roll out of the way and get behind a little bit of cover.
Instinctively acting a split second before she heard the world explode behind her, SosKaid leapt forward and rolled again, this time not quite getting to her feet, and she skidded sideways, sliding on some loose hay, and scrambled on her hands and knees for the back wheel of the rusted tractor. The short, wide reverberation in the room was once again followed by a soft tinkling of splinters falling on the vehicle's steel roof.
And it is then SosKaid's turn. She's going to turn with her pistol, and she's going to take a shot.
SosKaid took a whole second to breathe and draw her pistol. That was 2 shells, wasn't it? Trust your instincts, not your confidence. She stood from behind the wheel of the tractor, pistol already raised to her eye, ready to fire. She looked past the pin's sight into his red eyes, and just for a split second, she felt she could see something. Someone locked in there. Fear? She dropped her aim from the ghoul's head to his leg. Was she trying to kill him? The question bubbled up in an unpleasant sensation. Did she just kill people now?
I'm going to do a quick perception check to see if she can see where he's unarmored. I know he's armored on his arms. Perception survival. No. In fact, there's a complication. She takes just a second too long before firing the gun, and he's going to start running at her now, and that's going to make it more difficult to hit.
Joseph screamed again and immediately started running straight for SosKaid, brandishing the empty shotgun like a bat. There was no fear in his eyes now, only wild rage. Okay, breathed SosKaid as she felt failure and panic begin to rise in her. Where was Hawthorn? She squeaked and haphazardly pulled the trigger.
He has the defensive 1, I'm going to make it 2. She's going to take a shot. She's not aiming. She hits him, but with a complication. The complication, I think, is she does hit him in the torso. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 damage, which is huge. That's a critical hit. He's going to be bleeding then. He's only got 3 hit points left. But the complication is that he keeps coming at her and knocks her down. And he's now on top of her, bleeding, and it is a new round of combat.
SosKaid felt the bullet hit in the full of Joseph's chest, right in the flapping gap of clothing that ran down his center. A too large dark red patch immediately began to bloom as the bullet must have split up on contact. It should have been a fatal blow. The ghoul didn't even flinch. Before she knew it, he was on top of her, and she was knocked to the ground, the wind forced out of her, taking with it the shout for Hawthorn. The ghoul got to his knees, pinning SosKaid's thin body as he raised his weapon in both hands above his head, ready to strike.
His initiative is 16 as well. So he's going to go again. He is going to capitalize on the fact that he's knocked her down, and he's going to do an unarmed strike at SosKaid. And we're going to spend an action point for the Overseer to buy an extra dice. Difficulty 2, target number 8. Oh, and he gets it.
SosKaid! She heard Hawthorn shout. What do I do? I can't get a clear shot! SosKaid squirmed desperately, trying to squirm out from underneath the now green drooling ghoul. Just, she said as the man with surprising strength shoved the butt of the shotgun down into SosKaid's chest like a stake to the heart. The rest of her instruction came out as a lump of useless air.
Physical damage, doing 3 hits to the torso. Happily, she has 3 damage resistance, so she's able to withstand it. With the gun still in one hand, he He's lying on the ground on top of her, and he picks up the gun with both hands and does a massive hit in the chest. And I think she's winded, but she's not hurt. And now it's SosKaid's turn. I think she's unable to shoot. She's going to try and get him with the knife.
SosKaid gasped for breath as she heard her pistol clatter harmlessly to the wooden floor next to her. She struggled at her left thigh to get a knife out, but both her arms were trapped under Joseph's knees. He raised the butt of the rifle again, this time aiming for her head.
But now Hawthorn has a really clear shot. Target number 7, difficulty 1. She misses.
Suddenly, a moving red light flashed past the ghoul's head and sizzled into the timber wall behind her. It must have just grazed the crazed ghoul because he suddenly dropped his shotgun and put his hands to his ears. He screamed again, and SosKaid saw her chance.
Going to try and punch him in the face, and she gets him.
Wriggling her right hand free, SosKaid forced her winded, aching stomach muscles into one burst of strength. She put all of her energy behind her fist and clocked him straight in the jaw. It hurt like hell, and she felt a crunch in her inexpertly formed fist, but it did the job. Joseph rolled over, freeing her other arm, and she followed his momentum, getting herself on top of him as he did. But the victory didn't last as he grabbed her by the throat. SosKaid couldn't breathe. A blackness started creeping in around the edge of her vision, but she managed to get her knife into both hands, point facing down. She closed her eyes, and with all her strength, she pushed.
And so she manages to get him off her. She punches him in the head and rolls him off her, picks up the knife, and then she stabs him in the torso with the knife, and he's dead. Well, that was unexpected. So they collect themselves up, they're puffing, panting heavily, both of them, and SosKaid is bleeding, and so Hawthorn rushes over to try and heal her. She's not too badly hurt, but she is bleeding.
"What was that?" panted SosKaid, looking up at Hawthorn, who was also visibly shaken. SosKaid had propped herself up against the large rubber wheel of the tractor near where Joseph lay. She had her heavy coat off and the front of her once vivid blue vault suit open slightly, showing a quickly forming, slightly bleeding bruise just below her ribs. Hawthorn was effectively but tenderly patting it clean with a piece of cloth dampened from a nearby Dramen trough. Their eyes met for a second before SosKaid looked away. "Ah," she said as Hawthorn hit a sore spot.
So she's going to try and patch up SosKaid's chest.
"I don't know," replied Hawthorn, concentrating on the wound. "I've seen feral ghouls before, and that was different." "That's what I thought," said SosKaid. "You have any more of those pain meds?" Said Hawthorn uncertainly. "I think this is better in this case."
So she's going to use the stim pack.
"Right, thanks," said SosKaid, noting her feeling of mild disappointment. There was a little hissing sound as the small crucifix-shaped needle automatically injected its cocktail of healing agents, stimulants, and antiseptics straight into her side. "Can you stand?" said Hawthorn, stepping back. "Yeah, I think so." SosKaid grunted slightly, but she was able to pull herself up and began patting some of the dust and hay off her clothes, while checking and readjusting her equipment. She walked over to the crumpled figure of Joseph the Ghoul, husband, brief widower, and now nothing. Strangely, she noticed, the lumpy growths that had burst from his neck and side during the fight appeared to have mostly disappeared, leaving only some split skin and stretch marks. His eyes stared empty at the loft of the barn. They were clear now, showing no sign at all of that animalistic rage they'd held a few minutes ago. "Come on," she said, picking up the shotgun from where it lay and gingerly putting the strap over her shoulder. "We have to get back to town."
And as they sort of sit there figuring out what to do, they get a quiet 34 experience points. Here's 7 caps on him and a double-barrel shotgun. And then we have to go report back to Jesse Pettigrew. Okay, and we return. We had come back after finding out the ghoul had a psychotic break, murdered his wife, and was madly running around in the barn with a shotgun, trying to kill anyone who came in. We managed to take him down, and now we came back to explain to Jesse, the town mayor, what happened, and she was very upset and said that they needed a couple of days to work things out. We're welcome to stay in town and be fed until everything's resolved, and perhaps we should walk around and talk to some of the locals and see what we can see. I feel like the prepared adventure went better than I expected. At the beginning I thought, I don't really know how this is going to work. I'm just sort of reading everything here, but I really did enjoy it. So let's see how we go this time. I will test the expected scene this time, just to see what happens. I've made a note of some of the locations we can go. We have a pub, town square, trade post, and a clinic. I decided we weren't that much in control because SosKaid ended up on the ground a couple of times, and it was a pretty tight fight. So I raised the chaos factor to 6. So let's see if that affects our expected scene. The expected scene is that the party takes a day or two to recuperate in town and just ask around to see if they can learn more about it. So basically uninterrupted. So let's test that. That would be a 6. That would be a interrupt scene. So
It had been 2 days since the incident in the barn, and SosKaid sat on the overhang of the room she'd been granted to stay in. The sun had just made its way into the tank and the marketplace was beginning to get going. Ladders and ropes were being flung down to the tank floor as residents began their day, gearing up to head out to the fields or begin prepping the muddy earth for the flooding later that week. SosKaid picked her already very clean fingernails with her knife. She was getting itchy for something to happen. She had enjoyed the quiet of the day before, though, and spent some time in the fields shooting rotten fruit off the vines by way of getting her new rifle mod sighted in. Hawthorn had spent the day writing her report, and they hadn't talked much. Now, however, SosKaid was ready for something to happen. The safety was nice, but things weren't getting any better back in Newark without her. Her stomach dropped for a second as she thought about Aya for the first time in nearly a week. Just then, Hawthorn and Jesse climbed down from the ladder to the mayor's office nearby. SosKaid looked up, shielding her eyes from the sun rising behind them. She stood. "There you are," said Jesse. SosKaid nodded. Hawthorn said nothing but looked concerned. "Looks like we've got ourselves some visitors," said Jesse, glancing at a nervous-looking ghoul next to her. He had a sort of binocular attached to one eye on a pair of old glasses. "And they're here for you," she said, crossing her arms and frowning.
let's roll on the adventure list. See what the interrupt is. So, yellow is the D4. So that gives us a 7, which is the Keshar mystery. Well, that is makes sense. And then we have something to do with the Brotherhood of Steel outpost in Springfield.
SosKaid and Hawthorn followed the mayor through the elevated marketplace. There were the murmurings and whisperings of gossip and uncertainty in the air. SosKaid heard snatches of hushed words like feral, them, brotherhood, and her. She tried to ignore them and keep calm as they made their way down onto the tank floor and out of the town gates. What did the Brotherhood want with her? Were they going to help? Did they want to question her about Marcus Miller? Ramirez? Would they even believe her story? They could blame her, or possibly worse, be completely indifferent, leaving her to try and solve this whole mess on her own.
The Brotherhood of Steel have re-established themselves at the Springfield base, another small group probably, 3 to 5. They're hearing more rumours about the super mutants in Newark, and the perceived threat is increasing. I think for the sake of our story, they're sending people down from the Vancouver outpost, or some other base nearby.
2 Brotherhood of Steel members waited at the edge of the forest a little way out of town, and the group made their way down to them. SosKaid could feel Jessie tense as they got closer, but she tried not to let it show on her face.
Let me see, did we have another base? So yeah, there's the outpost in Springfield. Probably what we're going to do at some stage is add to the map some just additional bases that are around that would have been on the map when SosKaid got it from the boy. So far we only know about Vancouver and Springfield. There are surely a few more around. I know as we get down into Fallout 2 territory, there was certainly some around San Francisco, which is about as far south as Vancouver is north, and probably a few little things in between. So we're going to say the big one is San Francisco. There's an outpost up north in Vancouver. The small outpost in Springfield is basically just an operational base to be close enough to Newark to be able to get in there.
Their weapons weren't drawn, and as the group arrived, the pair of Brotherhood members introduced themselves stiffly but not unkindly. The one who appeared to be in charge politely asked if they could borrow the soldier and the Wastelander, and that Jesse's presence wasn't required. SosKaid looked at Jessie, who suddenly had a protective air about her, but she gave the mayor a nod of, "It's okay."
So I think they've gone back to Springfield, Falls Creek region, talked to them there, to the NCR. We'll find out what happened, whether that was a friendly talk or not. And they've sent a runner down because they've talked to the scientist, can't remember her name. Hopefully friendly, maybe not, maybe they've taken her. But they found out that if we survived, she knew that we were headed back towards Newark, maybe Keshar being the only other settlement in the region. So I think probably they assumed we were in Keshar and they came down to check us out. So the runner has come down and telling Hawthorn to report for duty.
"Okay," said Jessie. "But just for my 2 cents, these two are brave, honourable, and true to their word." SosKaid could see that she was holding her chin a little higher than natural, and her fists were slightly clenched. The Brotherhood member nodded, stepped forward, and extended his hand to the mayor.
Do they start any shit with the ghouls when they come in? I have to go with unlikely. No, they don't. But that is a 66, which means it is a random event.
She hesitated for a moment, but took it. "Thank you for that, Mayor. Your words will be taken into account." Jessie visibly relaxed a few degrees and then looked at SosKaid and Hawthorn again before blinking and turning on her heel to make her way back up to town. The Brotherhood member turned to face them and said, "Come with us, please," and without checking to see if they were following, walked into the forest. SosKaid and Hawthorn shared a look and an unspoken word, and then followed them past the tree line.
Okay, so first they're going to come in and they're going to take Hawthorn aside and interview her about the situation.
As they followed the Brotherhood a little way into the forest, they came to a small clearing where a tree had been cut down and a military-style tent had been set up. The leader was already standing at its flap. "Initiate," he said, indicating to Hawthorn. "Please step inside." SosKaid heard Hawthorn's little intake of breath as she smartly walked forward towards the tent. "If you wouldn't mind waiting here, ma'am." With a small nod, he turned and followed Hawthorn into the tent, while the other member stayed outside, very intentionally looking at nothing at all. The tent flap was swiftly rolled down, and a strong light suddenly illuminated Hawthorn onto the back of its wall. SosKaid sat on the fallen log and rested her elbows on her knees. She took a deep breath and pushed her palms into her eyes, rubbing them for thought. Something poked her and she looked up. Dogmeat dropped the stick in front of her and looked back expectantly. Wright sat in the new mayor's office at the centre of Newark. He'd relocated from Aya's modest shack on the side of the marketplace to a much grander building in the centre of town. He carefully folded a large pre-war map marked with small anally perfect circles, dotted lines and flourished handwriting, and set it off to the side of a large wooden desk topped with peeling red leather. Pulling a folder from his bottom drawer, he began to pore through small individually paper-clipped stacks, muttering to himself. Subject quality, degraded too quickly, terminated. Subject effects only partially held, terminated. He sighed and pulled out a second, much smaller stack. Subject displayed desired results. Minor side effects such as dry mouth, awkward gait, bloodthirsty indiscriminate violence before full transformation. Terminated. He picked up the larger pile again and started comparing certain lines. H male, H female, G female. He sighed again as there came a knock at the door. Come in. The door creaked awkwardly open. The tests are underway, sir, said a small ghoul at the door. We should have the results in a few days. The ghoul was bent over and fidgeting. Good, yes, thank you, said Wright dismissively. Sir, continued the ghoul, clearly looking uncomfortable. Yes. He has arrived. Wright looked up for the first time and studied the top of the ghoul's head for a second. He swallowed. Tell him I'll be right down. SosKaid bent and picked up the stick. Dogmeat tensed in anticipation as if she hadn't just done this 900 times. She flicked it high into the air just as a polite cough sounded behind her. She turned. The Brotherhood member and Hawthorn were standing outside the tent. Hawthorn was looking at the ground. If you would please come in, ma'am. The square tent flap was held open for her, and she stepped inside.
A PC positive. Ooh, okay. And they say, look, we're really grateful that you, saved Hawthorn essentially, and have been helping out, working towards the same goals here for the FEV. They need Hawthorn to report back, so we're going to lose her, but there's a PC positive.
The inside of the tent was unsurprisingly bare and pragmatic. A single cot lay along the left edge of the small space, butted up against a small locked crate. A green glowing radio sat on a clapped-out table, making its oscillating little radio whine.
I think the other thing is they're willing to assist us in getting in and getting the FEV.
And so, according to our shared contact, Dr. Drake, it appears we have somewhat shared objectives, concluded the Brotherhood member, looking up from the notes that the scribe had prepared for him. SosKaid stood next to the fold-out field table, having refused to sit. He looked up. But since you are unwilling to fully confirm the specific details of your conversation, we will have to work only semi-cooperatively in this matter. The man looked tired. He seemed genuine enough, and SosKaid had had to stop herself from spilling everything, passing on the responsibility and just being rid of it. But she'd kept Dr. Drake's words to heart.
We'll find out what they gave me. But first, I want to know, how was their interaction with the scientist? I want to know how they treated her, because that may affect what SosKaid does. So, did they have a peaceful interaction with Dr. Susan Drake? I'm going to call it 50-50. Yes, it was. Yes, it was a peaceful interaction. Did Susan go back with the Brotherhood to Springfield? It's unlikely because she really didn't want to go. No, she did not. Okay, so it was peaceful and she didn't go back. That's fine.
And by semi-cooperatively, you mean you won't immediately shoot me if you see me there too? She replied, snarkier than she felt. The officer sighed and detached a small device from his wrist, laying it gently on the table. He rubbed absent-mindedly at the mark it left. Look, he said. Protocol says that we should extract the required information and detain the individual in question, but we're not going to do that. Scribe Hawthorn's report shows you to have been a valuable ally to the Brotherhood, and in these times, to be honest, we need all the allies we can get.
They say they've got to go and regroup. They've got to take Hawthorn back with them. They're going to give us something to help us, and they've said they're going to support us to get in to the testing side.
Once this operation is complete, however, I recommend that you make yourself unlocatable for the immediate future. You understand? I understand, said SosKaid. The officer stood and gestured to the flap of the tent. For the meantime, and in thanks, the initiate has prepared some supplies for you outside. You may then say your goodbyes.
Now, what have they given us that's going to help? Something natural and large. Maybe some kind of weapon. Expected. Natural makes me think of water. It's a large amount of water.
SosKaid fought the irrational urge to salute to the officer as he stood to follow her out. Outside, Hawthorn and the initiate were finishing the loading of the last few plastic crates into a small wagon. They appeared to be full of plastic bottles and various other foodstuffs. Since we aren't heading back north as planned anytime soon, we have some surplus that I'm sure you could make use of. SosKaid nodded in thanks and looked over to Hawthorn, who'd retreated a little way off from the tent, looking awkward.
That's good. I mean, that's going to see us for a good, week or so, without finding anything else, so that's kind of nice.
Hey, said SosKaid after a slightly too long silence. Hey, replied Hawthorn. I'm not really good at goodbyes, said SosKaid. Her arms were wrapped around her thin frame as she traced a little line in the dirt with her foot. She caught herself and felt like an idiot until she looked up and saw Hawthorn smile. She chuckled. I'm such a bobblehead. Come here, said Hawthorn, and SosKaid stepped forward into the hug. It had been a very long time since she'd hugged anyone, and it felt good, almost safe. Hawthorn stepped back and stood with a slightly overdone straightness of back. SosKaid glanced behind her and saw that the other Brotherhood members were respectfully busying themselves facing the other way. Hawthorn relaxed slightly. I just wanted to say... She paused for a second and swallowed. Back at the drive-in? It's okay, said SosKaid, filling the unspoken moment. We got each other out of there. Hawthorn took a deep breath and nodded before taking a quick step back, wiping something from her eye. The Brotherhood officer, tailed by the initiate scribe, walked purposefully up to them. Come with me, please, both of you.
And they've said that they are going to set up outside of Newark. Let's say they're going to go to Gala. Gala was the place that the original dodgy guy in Newark had been doing some dodgy stuff. So they're going to go investigate that, and that's also going to be like a base for them if and when there is an attack on Newark. So they've told us they're going to Gala, and they're going to meet us there. How long until they meet us there? I'm going to say they're going to need, a day? We're sort of 1, 2, 3, 4 days walk. So 2 weeks.
Now, said the Brotherhood officer, immediately shifting the tone into military planning. They were all four perched on their haunches outside the flap of the tent. A map identical to SosKaid's, although completely blank, was spread out on the ground in front of them. The scribe initiate held another copy folded close to his chest like a nervous poker player. Scribe Hawthorn says you might know of a rendezvous point within striking distance of Newark. Is that right? He pointed to Newark with a thin extendable piece of metal and proffered it to SosKaid. SosKaid spent a few minutes recounting her knowledge of the area while the initiate took notes. The officer grunted intermittently before grumbling, It's a shame you don't have a proper map to compare. SosKaid's gaze flickered involuntarily towards Hawthorn, whose eyes were remaining stoically forward.
So in 2 weeks' time, at noon, we're going to meet them in Gala. And so they're going to go there, clear it out, call for the others, and we're going to meet there in 2 weeks' time in order to break into Newark and see if we can ideally arrest Wright and probably kill the super mutants that are there. And hopefully do all that without hurting any civilians or turning them against us. So we're just going to have to see. Okay, good. Let me write some of this down.
Then it's settled. 14 days at 1200 hours in this Gala place. If you are not present, we will not wait for you and move in at the appointed time. Is that clear? SosKaid nodded. Clear, she said. They all stood and the Brotherhood officer extended his hand. Thank you again, Wastelander. SosKaid shook his hand firmly like her father had taught her. And if all goes well out there, I'm sure Sir Bridget Rawls would welcome a soldier like you into the cause up north, if only to keep an eye on you. But if you were tired of wandering about in the Wasteland... Thanks, replied SosKaid. I'll think about it. With that, the officer stood, and the two others followed his lead. Men, he said, break down this digs and prepare for march. We leave in 1 hour.
It's a new day. I'd say it's mid-morning now. There was a storm brewing. So, okay, did the storm get worse? Yeah, it did. So it's now heavy rain.
SosKaid ran the last few metres up the hill to Keshar as the sudden rain had started coming down harder. Her boots began to suck at the mud. Entering the tank walls, she positioned herself under one of the overhead platforms, not to keep her dry per se, but at least to allow her to actually see. She took a minute to catch her breath and assess the complicated mixture of feelings that had been building up all morning. There was sadness that Hawthorn was gone, but somehow mingled with, what, shame? For getting so close to someone? There was achievement in progress toward her goal and doing good in helping Newark. Or was that just about taking down that bastard right for her own selfish reasons? Either way, the analysis was quickly buried behind a wave of fear and inadequacy. Gah! She hated feeling like this, when there was so much pushing in on her that she didn't want to feel or even begin to understand. She shook her head as if to dislodge the thought. There was a little jangling sound, and she looked down at Dogmeat gleefully shaking his coat in solidarity. "Good boy," she said. SosKaid felt a sudden twinge in her forearm and was annoyed she hadn't gotten more medicine.
So I think when it's raining like this, the first place we're going is the pub.
"All right," she said, bending down and inspecting the hopeful, friendly face of her canine companion. "Let's go to the pub."
So SosKaid bids farewell to Hawthorn and heads to the pub. Most people aren't working as much because of the rain. They've got some collection systems up, so they catch a lot of the rainwater, which is great for business because then they get to purify it and everything. So no one has to work too hard at the moment. I think a lot of people are in the pub and everyone's in pretty good spirits. So SosKaid goes into the pub. She sits up at the bar. She hands over a couple of caps. And although I don't think she's a big drinker, when you're in a bar and you want to talk to people, it's important to have a drink. So I think we're going to buy something. SosKaid's a beer drinker.
SosKaid pushed her way through the wooden swinging doors of the Tankyard Tavern, one of the two buildings built outside the flood zone of the tank floor. She wriggled her way out of her dripping heavy coat and hung it on a simple wooden peg on the wall. She briefly noted the quality of the craftsmanship of the peg, and then the line of puddle under the row of coats that already hung. She wasn't the first to seek refuge in the pub, it seemed. She took a deep breath, mentally preparing herself for social interaction, and squeezed the remaining water out of her jet black hair. She fixed her grubby vault suit slightly, and thought for the 100th time that she really must make the effort and give it a wash. But not now. She still had a job to do. She took another deep breath, arranging what she hoped was an amiable smile on her face, and pushed through the second wooden door.
We're going to drink a beer. I wonder if that improves our charisma. I reckon it does. Or at least, so does the person drinking it, but everyone else is drinking too. All alcoholic drinks have the same effect. Until the end of the scene, you may re-roll 1d20 on strength and charisma tests, but increase the difficulty of intelligence tests by 1. After drinking a beverage, roll a few dice equal to the number of alcoholic drinks you've consumed during this session. If 2 or more effects are rolled, you're addicted. Okay, so we get a re-roll to strength and charisma, but +1 difficulty to intelligence. So we're in there, we're having a drink. Everyone's more at ease. Everyone's pretty happy. And we're just going to start talking to people. The bar stool scraped as SosKaid pulled it up behind her. She perched on it, wondering which leg was better to cross over the other. Silly, she thought, and looked down as a metallic in that curious little boing, oing, oing sound indicated that someone had already given Dogmeat some water. He lapped at it distractedly, and SosKaid's stomach dropped as she realized he had that look in his eye. She braced. He shook. Water sprayed as if in slow motion over half of the table set off to the side of the bar. A hush fell over the room. And then someone burst out laughing. "We came in here to get away from the rain, you rascal!" The room swelled with sounds of chuckles and good boys as Dogmeat went from table to greet his fans. SosKaid relaxed as the locals patted the dog and threw her a good few natured winks and smiles. She chuckled too, and picked up the sparkling glass from the bar, tension and anxiety shedding from her chest, and so she started talking to people. Dogmeat, the good boy that he is sitting happily under the bar with a nice bowl of purified water, which they've kindly given to him. They do like dogs, the ghouls. And SosKaid finds out that Joseph's psychotic break isn't the first such case in town, and some residents are beginning to see a bit of a pattern. Over the past several weeks, several locals have been suffering memory loss that's caused a string of strange tragedies. So the PC's investigations should lead them to a medical clinic. Okay, so maybe I shouldn't have read that bit. Anyway, bar. At the pub. So, the inside of the pub is decorated with string lights, ancient road signs, decommissioned jukeboxes, and other memorabilia from an America that died long ago. Currently, several locals are gathered around the circular bar, enjoying time away from work or drowning their sorrows at the bottom of a glass. The single bartender on staff moves about quickly, engaging in light conversations as they keep up with the demand of thirsty patrons.
"Bad business, Joseph and Daisy. Really bad business." The bartender was rotating a cloth inside a very clean and long dry beer glass. He was looking up at SosKaid through his thickly hooded lids, clearly leaving space for her to fill in some details. "Yep," she said as she put down her empty glass. "Another?" he said, picking up the empty with an overhand grip and deftly, though somewhat unnecessarily, flipping it down into the cleaning tray under the bar. SosKaid nodded. "Sure," she said. Her first beer had been an interesting experience. She'd gone from timidly sipping at it, wondering why on earth anyone would be so keen to drink something that tasted like this, to getting into the rhythm of deeper gulps and ahs, followed by sucking in the foam from her upper lip but still not sure she was enjoying it, to, oh dear, it's empty, maybe I want another one, all in the space of about 10 minutes. She'd only ever tried alcohol once before when she was 14, when she'd snuck a few swigs from the bottle of rotgut her father kept in his workshop drawer for when his comrades came to visit. It had tasted flat-out chemical and had made her head spin and feel a bit sick. She hadn't got the point of the whole thing then, but now, as the slightly warm and buzzy feeling started to grow in the bottom of her chest, she thought maybe she did get it. She should be careful, though, not let her guard down. "Did Joseph come in here often?" she said, attempting a smile at the bartender and looking at them closely for the first time.
The bartender, their appearance, is delicate and old. So, a really, really old ghoul. This ghoul is so old, it's very difficult to tell whether it's a man or a woman. The voice is also really difficult to tell, but so old that the skin is like, it looks like that if he scratched his arm, he would put a hole in it. He's been bartending a long time. He was a bartender before. He's a bartender after. He's been bartending for hundreds of years. He's one of these people that really, really swims in being a bartender and just knowing about what's going on. Great person to talk to. Bartenders are always good. But he does say that he's only willing to dish out gossip about Joseph and Teresa if the PCs agree to a drinking game.
I'll tell you what, said the bartender, voice so faded it was barely there. Let's play a little game. Lay off, would you, Grim? Look at the size of her, came a voice from further along the bar. Don't mind him, chuckled Grim. It's all good fun, and the measure of a man besides. Woman, in your case, as it were.
Now, generally, this is not SosKaid's game. She's alone, for the most part, in the Wasteland. And she's a slight girl. And so getting off your face when you're alone in the Wasteland is maybe not the best idea, and she's sort of smarter than that. So what we're going to do, SosKaid is going, but she wants the information. She does feel pretty safe around here so far. So far, all her interactions have been, well, I mean, apart from the murderous ghoul in the barn, that's a fair point. So she's gonna try the old shoe in the boot trick or whatever.
Yes, the old shoe in the boot trick. Popularized by the Raiders of San Francisco, the shoe in the boot trick was a game or punishment, depending on the willingness of the participant, where one would have the shoelaces of one shoe tied to the boot of a car. The driver of said car would then proceed to, chuck doughies or drive the car around in the tightest, slidiest circles as possible, spinning the wheels, wasting fuel and kicking up burnt rubber smoke at a fantastic rate. If the participant was still standing when the smoke cleared, they win. If not, they didn't. What's this game then? Said SosKaid with a sigh. The bartender looked pleased and put a fresh foamy pint glass on the bar with one hand and flicked a small shot glass from up under the bar with the other. He caught it with the other hand he'd just set the beer down with and plinked it into place next to its bigger brother. Bartender's code, he said. Can't divulge private information at will, you see, but if you ask the right questions, well. SosKaid nodded, seeing where this was going. The bartender put another shot glass next to the first. One shot? He put a third glass next to the second. One question. And pulled a labelless bottle from somewhere in the mysterious depths from under the bar and stood it ominously behind the marching order of glasses. So, he said with a bony grin, shoot.
Booze in the boot trick or whatever, we're going to try and pretend to have the shots somehow. How's she going to do it? So I'm thinking she's got a lot of water on her. Maybe she could swipe a shot glass and sort of tuck it in her hand.
SosKaid was feeling good. A little too good. She caught herself realising as a customer came up to the bar to return the group's empty glasses. Thanks, Grim, said the customer. See you tomorrow. The bartender was busy filling SosKaid's shots with a continuous pour from the blank bottle. Not a drop hit the bar. The 9 glasses from the other customer, beer and shot, were placed on the bar with 9 fingers and coin danced to a stop. In that moment, she had an idea.
Okay, here's what she does. So she's sitting at the bar, right? She's pretty sneaky. She's going to try and steal a shot glass, so she has one spare under the bar with a bottle of water. She's going to sort of hold the water in one hand or have it between her knees or something. Or hold the bottle in one hand, have the glass between her knees. And basically she's going to pick up the shot. She's going to fill up a shot with water between her knees. She's going to pick up the shot, slip the water shot into her hand, sort of switch them around, and then shoot the water so that she can make slurping noises or whatever, and she's got wipe her mouth and that kind of thing. But then while she tips the other shot glass down onto the floor. That's what we're going to try and do. First, we're going to see if we can steal a glass. So this will be agility and sneak.
Okay, I'll play, said SosKaid. But any chance you might have a bottle of water back there? Stay hydrated and all that? She attempted a smile and felt she'd nailed it. Sure, said Grim, finishing his pour and returning the bottle to one of the hidden realms back under the bar. He turned and pulled something plastic off the shelf behind him. While his back was turned, and without looking at the cluster of glasses, SosKaid leant her left elbow on the bar while holding one of the full shots dramatically up in front of her, with her right. With her left hand, she felt for the short, sticky rim of an empty under her exploring fingers. She tipped it and rolled it into the palm of her hand and back down under her side of the bar.
So that's going to be a 12. The bartender's sober. I'm going to say it's a difficulty 2. Can she steal the glass? I'm going to risk it. I'm going to see if we can do it. It is a tagged skill. We rolled a 2 and a 14. The 14 does not hit, but the 2 gives us 2 points. So SosKaid manages to successfully nick one of the shot glasses that was left empty in a row of shot glasses from some of her neighbouring ghouls or whatever. She manages to swipe one. And then, as they're talking, and he says, look, I'll tell you more about it, but you got to take shots.
What is this stuff anyway? She asked as she inspected the raised shots and simultaneously tucked the stolen glass between her knees. That, my dear Wastelander, said Grim with a grim grin, is Mikey's favourite moonshine. He hasn't been here long, but already his brew is pretty famous round these parts. Huh, said SosKaid, sniffing at the clear liquid. It smelled of fuel and headache, and a hint of boot. Infamous, really, muttered the bartender thoughtfully. Anyway, fire away. Inspecting the shot one final time, SosKaid dropped her right hand under the sightline of the bar as she brought her left with the empty shot to her mouth. A clumsy trick, she realised now as she was doing it, but so far so good.
So, she does this. She manages to steal the glass. And then we're going to take 3 shots as he answers 3 questions. I see that there are 3 dot points in the book. We're going to see how many of them she succeeds. Says she's going to need an endurance and a speech test. Difficulty equal to 1 plus the number of shots they've had. So happily, we're going to ignore that because we're not having the shots. But instead, she's going to have to do a sneak test with the difficulty increasing by 1 each time to do the shot trick. So starting with difficulty 1, 2, and then 3. She takes the first shot. She's stolen the glass successfully. Now she takes the shot to see if she can convince him that she's having the shots and ask the first question. So this is now difficulty 1, 2, and 3. So difficulty 1 should be no problem. That's a success. And she asked about Teresa.
Joe and Days were always together, they were. They worked together, drank together, talked, read. Nothing like any of my exes. I was always looking for excuses to get away from them, eh? Know what I mean? Ha! Not Joe, not Daisy. The bartender had settled into natural gossip mode as he picked up the first of the empty shot glasses from the bar. Until a few days ago, that was. He looked pointedly at SosKaid and then at the second shot in line. She picked up the glass. Grim continued.
And the bartender says that recently Teresa stopped by the pub almost daily when she finished work. She stayed late, drank a lot, and seemed troubled. So maybe that means that her husband was slowly deteriorating. Perhaps that's what that is. Useful information to perhaps, like it wasn't overnight. Something was going on for a while, recently. And she tries to do a second shot. That is an 8 and a 15. We did use an action point. 13. So she gets busted. And he says, "Oi, what are you doing? Not only are you not having the shots, but you're wasting their good liquor."
Oi, you spilled that one, said Grim, looking annoyed. He repositioned the empty glass on the bar and filled it again. I was gonna give you one on the house for your work in town, but you can pay for that up front now. SosKaid sheepishly counted out a number of caps onto the bar and mumbled an apology. She looked at the 2 lethal-looking shots menace at her. Ah, fuck it, she said, and tipped her head back. For real this time.
So the second one, we take the shot. And now we have to do an endurance speech test with a difficulty equal to 1 plus the number of shots. So now it's a difficulty 2 endurance speech, which is not so good for SosKaid. That'll be a 5 difficulty 2. We need 2 5s somehow. Ooh, 3 and a 6. We can re-roll one of them. And that's a 20. That's a complication.
The shot hit her like a door. She felt her teeth immediately bleach as mouth bacteria from months in the wastes went to meet their maker. Christ, she thought. No wonder Mikey has such a radiant smile. Her head was already beginning to spin a little, so she focused hard on what Grim was saying. Very strange it was. I thought maybe they were just having marital issues or something, although I doubted it. I wish I'd have taken it more seriously and tried to talk to her. A few days ago this started, she said SosKaid, gripping the bar slightly as her stool gently rotated beneath her. Yeah, he said. Bad business, all that. He looked up from his reverie as SosKaid slammed a third glass on the bar. She didn't think she'd ever felt this good. Are you right there, love? Said Grim, concern now on his face. Never better, she said, as she lined up the beer glass on the bar with one hand and then carefully pounced on it with the other before it got away again. You were saying? SosKaid staggered slightly as she awkwardly aimed her last step down into Keshar's muddy tank floor. She giggled, stood up straight and raised her arms in the air. Ta-da! She said quietly to herself with a smile, and then remembered that Hawthorn was gone, and frowned. It was late. The rain was really pounding down now, and she still didn't have a good lead. She noticed a light coming from the other side of the town's wall. A door was open, and she thought she could hear shouting over the drumming of the rain. Was that the trading post? Well, might as well go and ask around there before calling it a day, hey? Maybe they could help with her investigation. Everyone here's so nice, she thought, happy again as she weaved towards the building. She was concentrating so hard on getting each foot into the next step in front of her that she completely failed to see the raised shotgun in the figure's hand before her. So nice, she thought, giggled, and continued to climb the stairs. Thank you for joining me on another episode of A Wasteland Story. This episode was the second of 3, loosely playing the first chapter of the published adventure With a Bang and a Whimper. If you're interested in checking that out, you can find it over in the Fallout 2D20 core rulebook. And if you're interested in playing published adventures in general and learning more about the different ways that one can, in fact, play pre-written adventures as both GM and players simultaneously, I know, it's odd, I have a short 2-part post up on my Patreon over at patreon.com/solo-roleplayers, which you can get access to by just signing up as a free member. I don't have a lot of posts on there, but I try to put up something from time to time when I feel like writing stuff that's not Fallout script. You can also check out the episode Playing Published Adventures with Tana Pigeon using a completely different method over on the Solo Roleplayers podcast. There's also a premium episode coming out soon on Solo Roleplayers Patreon where I play through a published adventure site in Forbidden Lands, testing out yet another technique, and I'm still not done experimenting. Last episode, I mentioned a secret project that will yield some more Fallout content for the hardcore fans in the future, and while I'm not quite ready to talk about it yet, I can say that I'm about halfway through the project, probably, and it should be just about ready to announce by the time the next episode comes out. As always, if you want to get in touch with me, you can send an email to awastelandstorypodcast@gmail.com or find PJ Sack over on Reddit. That's it from me today, but I look forward to catching you next time when SosKaid learns just how painful a hangover can be and Dogmeat remains a good boy. Good boy, Dogmeat. Good boy. Ta-da!